welcome to your newest episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast with your host, myself, Laura Matsu, and my husband, Bernhard Gunther. On this episode, we are going to discuss how to thrive in 2025, a psycho-spiritual guide. So the past few years have left many people in a much different world than they were before. I've heard comments from people saying that the jump from 2019 to 2024 felt violent, intense, and almost unnatural because they've lived 5 different lives in that period of the past few years alone. This intense period of global chaos that we've been in has led many into profound both inner and outer transformations. The world we've known has suddenly shifted, and we now find ourselves in a much different landscape than before. Not only are many of us in a much different person from these experiences, but as a result, many of our relationships have shifted. For some, their work has shifted, their purpose, maybe their daily life has entirely changed. There's also been mass migrations of people as well to different countries. And as we near the end of 2024, with 2025 being a big shift as all the outer planets are about to change signs, it feels like right now we're in a bit of a limbo state between the world we knew, the new world we're entering, or maybe the life we knew and the new life that we're entering, the person that we were, the person that we're becoming. So this next year, 2025, will represent a massive evolutionary change for us as individuals and for the collective. Not only is this an end of a year, but with all the outer planets about to change signs, it's also the end of an era. So it's a good time to reflect over the past years, what you've learned, what has changed, and most importantly, plant seeds for what you want to create in this new era in the future. So in this podcast, we're going to reflect on this end of the era and especially reflect on how we can use the power of creativity right now and creative visualization to imagine the world we want to create. We'll also discuss what to reflect on as the outer planets change signs, what kind of themes are going to be coming up, how they may manifest in your personal life. And we're going to talk about how things could manifest much faster as all the outer planets are about to change into both air and fire signs, which are both masculine and outward orientated signs. And most importantly, the importance of creative visualization, which is the Leo polarity opposite sign and how opposite sign to Aquarius, where Pluto is. And especially noticing how our thoughts become reality. We're also going to talk about this important concept of seed people. Seed people are people who represent the wave of change who will take us into the future, and how you can become an agent of change of this new era yourself. And in the second hour, we're going to talk about how the nodes are going to switch from Pisces to Virgo very soon, and how this will bring into focus certain themes around mind, body, spirit health, other themes that you can look for in your lives that you can work for. We're going to talk about Jupiter in Cancer next year and the importance of really following your bliss and how to find what that bliss is. And we're also going to discuss some of the secrets to reality creation and manifestation that many New Age teachings around this miss. So when we're talking about thoughts becoming reality, creative visualization, we're going to give you some tips in the second hour on how to do this from an authentic place without spiritual bypassing, which is, law of attraction stuff is a little bit infamous for being used for that, and give you some tips and tricks for how you can do that from our own experience too. So for those who are new to our podcast, we always have a second part for the podcast for members of our membership. So if you want to join us, go to veilofreality.com/membership, and you'll get access to not only the second hour of this podcast, but 140 hours of the previous 140 podcasts that we've recorded. And I think it's only about $11 a month. It's less if you pay for a 6-month or a 1-year membership. So let's just first begin by, briefly, even though it'll be hard to do it briefly, just reflect on the past 5 years. I guess it's nearing 5 years, 2025. And just a quick update where we are now a short update on current events. So let's just talk about, I mean, this all started in 2020, really, especially around that Saturn-Pluto conjunction, right? And that's when COVID hit, the lockdowns, the government tyranny, the mandatory or, really pressuring people to vaccinate, the intense polarization really heated up. I just want to touch on something too, for me personally. 2020 was such a weird year for me to enter because I had the end of 2019, as you know, I was in a 2-week meditation retreat, basically learning how to detach from my thoughts, how to experience what the Buddhists call emptiness, non-dual awareness. And so I was in a really strange space spiritually when all this happened, when everyone started masking up, everyone started getting into fear. I was so sensitive to what was going on. And it was I just remember at the beginning, it was just so much more intense because for those who have been to meditation retreats, when you leave, you're in this kind of bubble of sensitivity for at least a week to even months after. And I just remember seeing the craziness and chaos and just being so sensitive to everything that was going on in the beginning.
Yeah, I remember that. So you were at the meditation retreat December 2019, right?
Yeah,
Towards
exactly.
And then I remember we actually went to Germany in January, end of January, to visit my parents in Munich. And that's when it already started, some sort of virus and China and all these things. And people already, I remember, started wearing masks at airports. All these people were masked. And I was like, here we go again. And up to this, I was already aware, of how so-called epidemics were going used for other nefarious agendas. Even back then, the swine flu or all kinds of other epidemical flus were used to shut people down, to crack down draconian laws or even vaccination programs, all of that. So I thought, well, here we go again. But I was also thought in my naive way, well, people are going to look through this eventually. This is ridiculous. It's too obvious. But I remember we came back from Germany. We also started just our embodied soul awakening programs around that time. But then it became worse and worse with what happened in the world. And I was so shocked. And I got angry too, on a personal level, right? Because from my position was everything so obvious and all the quote unquote conspiracies became true, so to speak. But it was what I saw, this collective matrix trauma program, because it put people into survival fear response. And they were just going along with a lot of this stuff. And it resulted in some sort of splitting within humanity. There was a fraction of humanity or people standing up and fighting for truth against the censorship, against the lockdowns, against all of that. But I already knew, I wrote an article, I remember early 2020, already quote unquote exposing this coronavirus thing and how also on a metaphysical level, by infusing the fear, right, you believe in a dangerous virus and pathogen and illness and disease and flu. You literally create that, and people, I feel, become sick just because of this inherent belief program, because the mind overrides everything and can create disease, literally, beyond even the virus question, all of that. And I already wrote in this article in January 2020 that, okay, the agenda is just probably to get people onto a vaccination program and all of that. And all of this happened, but I was not aware how severe it was.
Yeah.
It was definitely very intense.
Yeah.
And even on a personal level, we were moving, a lot of things shifted in our personal lives, adjusting with all of that. And then it was just an intense roller coaster over the past 4 years that, really saw this also when we were working with people in our embodied soul awakening program, like you said, how they gone through a lot of transitions, transformations, and like a rude awakening, so to speak, right? That happened for many people.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're listening, I know a lot of people, they've lost friends, they've lost family. And I'm not just talking about meaning they've died. That's happened to a lot of people. But they've also lost friends and family over what's happened and being dehumanized by them. So that's left people in a certain place. A lot of people had to quit their jobs because of vaccine mandates, and a lot of people felt they needed to speak up and say something, and that also created all sorts of consequences. A lot of people moved, a lot of people left cities that were more harsh in the lockdowns as well. Sometimes they moved to a whole different country. So you just see this massive wave of change, permanent change, displacement. I would also argue a lot of people are still dealing with a lot of unprocessed anger and emotions and grief from what went on. Maybe she talked about on other podcasts as well. But this was one of those moments where things in our lives over the past 5 years have irreversibly changed, which is very makes sense for the end of an era too. And there's no going back. Like, that's Pluto in a nutshell, is like permanent, irreversible change. There's no going back. And I noticed just from what people commenting right now, they feel like they're almost in like a sort of like no man's land, a certain limbo state, right? Like their old life has changed, but the new person that they're becoming or the new life they're living hasn't really maybe fully manifested or grounded in the way that they want to. So I think that this is what we're going to be leading into. And now, quick update to where we are now. I noticed there's a lot of divide and conquer, at least on Twitter. I think some of this is being psychologically engineered. We have a lot of really emotionally immature people basically fighting on Twitter online over this H-1B visa, which Elon and Vivek came out supporting. For those who are not paying attention, the H-1B visa is an immigrant visa that allows U.S. employers to employ foreign workers in specialty occupations. You have to have a bachelor's degree or higher. They have to prove that it's not going to harm a U.S. citizen. Basically, it's a way to get international talent to work at companies. So Elon and Vivek came out supporting these H-1B visas. So did Trump. What is called the woke right are now in a bit of a battle with what's called the tech bros about these H-1B visas. So for anyone who works in tech, I'm sure they know that they have a lot of foreign talent, especially from India and Asia. And the woke right believe that the job should go to Americans. And when you go even more further right, they believe it should be given to white Americans. So for those who are new to this concept of the woke right, it's basically people on the right who believe that white people have been oppressed, that they need to save the white race. A lot of them lean into very pro-fascism type of behavior, even becoming very pro-Hitler, even becoming very racist. So if you look at James Lindsay and some other people, they're calling it the woke right. So basically, the woke right meaning they're aware of systems of oppression that have been oppressing white people and they want to correct it, basically. And so they're really upset that these so-called H-1B visas, which are basically Indians and a lot of Indians in the tech world and people from Asia, are taking away jobs from white Americans.
Yeah, exactly. And basically, the reason people got upset because Elon Musk said that he's going to hire the best people, no matter what, no matter the nationality, to make America great again, actually, right? To help actually American economy. And you can argue about the detail, the H-1B visa, and even I think Vivek and Elon acknowledged there are some issues, it can be abused. But what I saw is what you mentioned towards the end. There's definitely some disturbing shadow coming out, as I have written about before in the conservative right MAGA movement, and that is actually true racism, right? I've seen people really being racist against Indians, right? And wanting even have no immigration at all, not just illegal, but no legal immigration. So that turns more into fascism, very far right. And I've seen some disturbing tweets the other day, even from the guy, Andrew Torba, I believe is his name. He's also the CEO, founder of Gap and other social media. He's a hardcore Christian, Christ is king. But he had an insane tweet that literally just said, I quote, "Be racist or be replaced."
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. So there's this racist shadow coming out as a knee-jerk reaction to this whole leftist agenda, to the illegal immigration and all of that. So it becomes an exaggeration that can literally lead to true fascism, Nazism, and real racism. When I mean by real racism, I don't mean the, leftist media idea of just calling anybody who is conservative racist.
No, I mean actually hating people
Exactly.
who are a different race than you. And so the main thing I just want to touch on is like what we need to keep an eye out just in regards to current events is that divide and conquer is going to infect any movement, right? And it's going to play with psychological warfare and the emotional immaturity of the people in order to divide and conquer a movement. And that's pretty much what's going to go on. And I think, unfortunately, I've noticed there's lots of people in the conservative MAGA movement who are extremely emotionally immature and who have basically adopted very extreme ideas in response to the far left. And, communism and fascism, James Lindsay makes a good point, even though I don't agree with lots of things he says, just as a caveat, that they come in pairs, right? So we have the communism on the left, and as a response, almost as like a law of polarity, we have the rise of fascism. So I think personally, for me, is like, I honestly just need to unplug a little bit from what's going on because we have such an excellent opportunity to create the world that we want to live in. And there's going to be all this infighting and all this like focusing on, who's right, who's wrong, and what's the best, right? But at the end of the day, like, who are the people who are actually going to take action, who are going to create the necessary cultural shift that we need in order to make this world the way that we want it to be, especially this excellent opportunity we have now, But I think we just need to be aware that communism and fascism, they arrive in pairs. And so we are going to see revolutionary movements and radical movements with Pluto and Aquarius on both sides. Totalitarianism functions on both sides of the spectrum, both the communism and the fascism. So I think this is just going to be an ongoing thing we have to be aware of, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then also just reflecting real quick personally over the past 4 or 5 years, I found myself even warming up to more conservative values and all of that and understanding, even getting more politically engaged, even though before that I was completely anti-statist, anti-political. I've already talked about this. But I see it more nuanced, right? We cannot go from A to Z when you have to intermediate states. But within that, because of what's happening now, I become also disillusioned or, not attached to the conservative MAGA movement either. Or not even the quote unquote truth movement, which I have my own disillusionment process because they also get into doom and gloom and project on Elon and Trump, and they bring in the technocracy, but there's always this polarization, positionality, as you mentioned. And from personally, there has been a change going because of the inner work. Something else needs to happen. We need to be the change and really engage in activating our creative power to really create a positive world. And that doesn't happen just by constantly projecting and externalizing everything.
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing is like so many of us have learned really essential and often difficult lessons, even let's reflect on since Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. Like, think about how much has happened in regards to your own psychological and emotional evolution in the past 15 years. Yeah. I, for myself, have lots of planets in cardinal signs. So for those who are new to astrology, Capricorn is a cardinal sign. So when Pluto is in Capricorn, it squares, opposes, or conjuncts other cardinal signs. So I've been through the ringer, basically, for Pluto and Capricorn. And this is something I think we need to actually reflect on. Like, think of how much psychological and emotional change has happened in your life since 2008 that have really changed your soul, that have put you on a different track of soul evolution. Pluto transits is often shocking events, shocking realizations, situations in your life that happened maybe surprisingly, that were maybe difficult at first, but then eventually helped you evolve. That's a big theme, is like these kind of psychologically and emotionally disturbing events that helped you evolve. Like, think about how much of a different person you are from 2008 to 2025. And then also, another way that Pluto affects us is new relationships, new people, new teachings, new goals. Think about what has arisen in the past years that have helped you in your evolutionary process. What situations in your life have you shown where you're stagnating? What did you learn? What new gifts within you did you maybe realize in the past 5 years or even 15 years? Because I think basically, in my opinion, the past 5 years have been a pressure cooker for soul evolution for those who were guided to do so in the past 5 years. We've had tons of material to work with, tons of chaos in our lives, tons of friction in our relationships, tons of big decisions to make. Like, I think people have been under a pressure cooker of, change basically. And now they're left as an entirely different person. And the question is like, where do I go from here? The person who I was is no longer here. I'm a new person, and this new person probably has new goals, new ideas, new desires that they want to manifest.
Yeah, and that's why I feel even this with Pluto, like you said, these are changes beyond your control as well.
Yes.
And either you kind of go along with it.
Yeah.
And embrace the changes consciously, or you'll be dragged along, right? As you hold on to your outdated self, and then the suffering becomes more intense.
Yeah. And one thing I also want to add, and this is such a big keyword, is like Pluto transits will strip away all the bullshit from you until all that's left is your authentic self. And I think this is kind of what's going on, is like a lot of us got pressured into speaking out or making a decision that we knew wasn't going to be popular. And I feel that a lot of people actually are way more in tune with their authentic self who have gone through this process, right, in a conscious way. And they're really more in tune with like what they really want rather than what society wants for them. Because when you get forced by society to make a choice, either take a vaccine that could potentially kill or injure you, or do an unpopular thing that could, make you disliked by your peer group, that does something to you as a person.
Who said there was a Gabramate saying there's no authenticity without pain or suffering?
Yeah, exactly.
Like that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we've learned through lots of painful experiences how to be our authentic selves. So this is like such a good starting point for where we're leaning into, because creating a world from our authentic self rather than our socially conditioned self is exactly, I think, the place we need to be as we enter this new era. Because I think what we need to watch out, we'll talk about this more in the second hour and later, we want to watch out for creating the reality that these external forces of control want to create through us.
That's very, very important. The matrix is essentially, I've talked about this before, a mind program. It works through us. It's not really out there. People who focus externally focus on the symptoms. They want to create, as Laura rightly said, their desired reality through us. So if you externalize everything, buy into the negativity, doom and gloom, oh, these people are doing this to us, you keep reinforcing that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't imply to deny what's going on, but it needs a deeper psychospiritual approach and also a positive, optimistic vision, because there's a lot of opportunity. I was just reflecting briefly when you said the past 15 years, I'm like, oh my God, if you would have told me 15 years ago that I'm doing what I'm doing now, I would have laughed at you with disbelief, right? I've gone through intense changes, especially the last 5 years, similar with relationships. Some of my best quote unquote friends have gone out of my life, friction, disillusionment. It has changed completely. That was also beyond my control, but I also engaged in it fully consciously, right? And did the work in order to really let go. And it's easier said than done because you have to process a lot of emotions somatically in your body. So you don't suppress this or externalize it and project it onto others.
Yeah. And on a basic level, like the practice that I do is I just sit every night for 20 minutes, ideally minimum, and I just sit and allow myself to breathe into what I'm feeling in my body, allow myself to experience it. I exhale, let it go. So this emotional processing is really huge if we want to start out with a clean slate. And another thing too, so let's talk about Neptune being in Pisces since 2011. So Neptune is about dissolving the old reality. Neptune in Pisces can feel like a fog. It is in one way about finding peace, our desire for transcendence, and it can also be about intense moments of disillusionment, confusion, illusion. And so we've kind of been in this fog since 2011 with Neptune being in Pisces, its home sign. And I think it's a good time to reflect on what's happened since then, since 2011, 2012, in regards to your own spiritual awakening. The reason I find Neptune in Pisces transit so interesting, because I've spoken to a lot of people, including myself, who seem to have gone through awakening experiences in 2011 and 2012 that completely dissolved their old life. And that happened for me very strongly. I've talked about this in other podcasts, but basically I was recovering from opiate addiction at the end of 2011. And then in 2012, I had this intense moment of complete desperation. They call it rock bottom, where I prayed, and then I experienced, I prayed to God for the first time in my life. I didn't even like have a concept of like praying or God at that point. And then I experienced an intense period of synchronicities, which helped me get out of the dark place that I was in. But it really was a moment of spiritual awakening for me. And it was a complete disillusion of like the old world that I had been living in from then.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of people mentioned that we've talked about this before, big shift change for them 2012.
Yeah.
Which are also somehow about the Mayan calendar. And people had all kinds of new age ideas. We're going to ascend to the fifth dimension or whatever. But, you know, they're just mostly, it's an internal deep transformation that is not always pleasant.
Yes. And this focus of dissolving boundaries, structures will change when Neptune enters Aries in March 2025. So an old identity melted away during that Neptune in Pisces, and you may feel inspired by a new vision of who you are and what you're becoming. And like almost like a new vision of your identity is going to be emerging in March 2025. So there can be questions coming up for people like, who am I? What's my purpose? What really matters to me? And really almost like differentiating yourself from others a little bit and focusing more on the individual. And with Saturn joining Aries in May 2025, it's going to be a good time to start a new project that's centered around your new vision for the person you're becoming. So really thinking about like identity. Who are you as an individual, separate from the masses, separate from the consensus? An old identity has dissolved and a new identity is just beginning. And is there something new that you can begin from this new person that you are, especially after all you've been through the past 5 years? I think this is a really exciting time for people.
Yeah, and I think the whole topic of identity is an issue with itself, because the trap is actually identification. I've written some articles about it. And the ultimate identity you really want to establish within yourself, identifying with your true self, your essence, who you truly are, your eternal self, and not identifying with the transient attachments of the ego personality. It identifies itself with, even with like your nation, your race, your tribe, your family.
Yeah, which is kind of...
You can still care for them, but when you've really identified with them, you contribute to the conflict, to the polarization, and all of that.
Which actually, you make a really interesting point, because I realize with Neptune and Aries, like fighting for the individual based on these like racial identifications, like what race you are, etc. Like, I think this is actually, this whole H-1B visa is almost like a taste of what we're going to see happen on a consensus level, on a mainstream level with Neptune and Aries, like people fighting for their individual identity and then identifying, I'm a conservative, I'm a white person, I'm a man, whatever, you know, all these external identifications. When I'm talking about it, I'm more interested in like, who's the real I, you know, who's the real soul within you? Your soul has probably changed and developed new skills and abilities over the past 5 years, I imagine, if you're listening to this podcast. And that new person that you are on an internal soul level has a new mission, has a new destiny, and I'm not talking about your identity as like, I'm a white male American 30 whatever. I'm not talking about that external identity. That's a good point, because that's how the mainstream will kind of take it. I'm talking about who you are as an individual soul, your real I, your true self, your authentic self. There's something unique about you that only you can bring into this world, and that's something you need to bring forward.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about Uranus also in Taurus since 2018, and it's going to leave in July 2025 when it's going to enter Gemini. So Uranus transits represent where we want to break free from routine, from convention. They create a sense of restlessness, desire for freedom. Often they want us to have a new perspective, a new routine. Like Uranus transits want to shake up our lives a little bit. And so with Uranus in Taurus in 2018, we saw revolutionary changes around finances, resources, how people sought security. We saw the rise of the homesteading movement, people seeking freedom through idealizing living off-grid and being sustainable. That's actually when I moved into an intentional community where we were meant to grow our own food and live in community, etc. I think when Uranus enters Gemini, we're going to have a lot of people actually, like, there's going to be some people that life works for them, all the best to you, but there's going to be a lot of people who are going to actually move on to something different, I think. And then we also saw the rise of decentralized currencies like Bitcoin with Uranus and Taurus. Uranus in Gemini, though, which will enter again in July 2025, on a collective level, these shakeups and revolutions are going to happen the way we communicate, the way we learn. It's going to happen in transportation, how we use technology. So on a kind of consensus level, the way we communicate is going to change because of the technological revolution. It's going to be crazy. I wouldn't even be surprised if we don't even need to type anymore. We can just communicate via telepathy eventually. The way we learn online, education is going to experience an intense shakeup. Transportation, even self-driving cars apparently are going to be all over the place. And, there's going to be all sorts of things in our everyday lives that is going to be really affected by this technological revolution. And on a more internal level, I want people to be aware of ideas and insights you get while Uranus is in Gemini. It's a time to move away from seeking freedom through just collecting resources, homesteading, prepping, and instead seeking freedom in how you express yourself. So look at how you may need to express yourself more authentically with Uranus and Gemini.
Exactly. So that's the key point, which goes back to, again, the inner work and creating to your essence, which will you have more access to your creative potential, which we'll dive deeper into, because it's really important. There's a tendency to point out more what's kind of wrong with the world and criticizing instead of really focusing on what we want to create. And you have more creative power when you work through these layers of conditioning and reactive behavior. Yeah.
And the most important thing I want to say is that all the outer planets will be in air and fire signs. So Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus in Gemini, those are air, and fire, Neptune in Aries. So this marks a major shift in emphasis from feminine, yin, inward energies of earth and water to the masculine, yang energies of fire and air. So let's just talk about air and fire and how it relates to ideas and taking action. So I see that right now, especially, we're kind of in this limbo state that a dream of the world that we want to create is emerging. So there's a real importance right now to dream the world you want to live in, create a visualization, healing any unprocessed emotions that are keeping you stuck, focusing on the doom and gloom, focusing on what could happen, focusing almost like in a hyper-vigilant way, like waiting for the other shoe to drop because of things that went wrong in the past 5 years. Because there's going to be an emphasis on the masculine side of ourselves in 2025 with this fire-air energy. So fire is about passion, spontaneity, the need for action, taking risks, while air is about intellect, our ideas, our visions, our knowledge, and propelling them into the future with Aquarius. So 2025 is a year to really take action on your ideas and really make something happen.
Well, this fire-air mix with Aries and also Aquarius could also result in a lot of rebels without a cause, right?
Yeah, and things can ignite really fast and blow out just as fast as they ignite. Like we have to keep in mind that when we're working with air, like things can change really, really quickly, and they can also change again really, really quickly. So, it's going to have this quality that's going to kind of be a little bit all over a place compared to the sustainability of Pluto and Capricorn.
And also to counterbalance that, it would be important, even more so important, to stay grounded in your body, in the earth element, right? Yeah. Also water emotionally, to kind of flow like water, as Bruce Lee would say, and don't get stuck or too identified even with certain opinions, the intellect and all of that.
Yeah.
But stay grounded in your body, because even with this technological exponential age we are entering, which is part of the evolution of consciousness, we just need to be aware that we don't lose ourselves within that.
And one thing I'm really thinking about with Pluto and Aquarius is the importance of creative visualization, which is the Leo polarity, and noticing how your thoughts become and affect reality, which is more the air side, right? And I think we need to be really mindful of the media we consume and ask ourselves, what reality is this person trying to program into me and create through me? So if you're following people who are all doom and gloom and it's going to be a technological prison and blah, 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 right? Unfortunately, you're literally hooking in and creating that desired reality through you. Through you, they're creating that desired reality through you. And I'm not saying, that there isn't truth to whatever perspective or whatever. I'm not saying to just denial and go into love and light. I'm saying that now is the time to really harness the power of your creative potential and create the reality that you want to create instead of creating other people's realities through you, which are more doom and gloom and like, oh my God, the whole world is going to go to shit, nihilistic kind of outlook.
Exactly. So being very mindful and discerning what kind of information you expose yourself to is key.
Yes,
absolutely.
Especially right now, yeah.
And you can easily get distracted or doom scroll for people who are more on social media, internet, or getting lost in other people's thoughts, and everything has a certain frequency. And it's not about denial, like the New Age way, but, even little things like Laura said, every day, do your clearing meditation. When you wake up in the morning, do you first thing in the morning go on your phone, go on social media? That's not healthy. Yeah. I recommend, for example, first thing in the morning, I go on a walk. Thanks to Leo, our dog, I have to take him on a walk. But it's amazing. For sunrise, I go on a walk out in the sun, I come back, do a little meditation. And then before I even get into my work, email, or the internet, let alone social media, I sit down and read a book that really inspires me and I can learn from.
Yeah.
Right? So on that, then set a certain intention for the day, get myself into the right mind frame. And this has proven to be exceptionally great because I've literally read 4 or 5 books over the last couple of months by this consistent pattern. So it's also about creating certain patterns and not giving in to the quick dopamine hit and indulgence, right?
Yeah. And I think it's really, one thing I recommend people do is like write down your values in life, your core values. Is it knowledge, creativity? Is it inner work? Is it relationships? Is it health? Is it home? Whatever. And then, so write down a few core values and write activities that align with those values and spend at least like 80% of your waking life focused on things that align with your values. Because when you spend your life focused on things that don't align with your values, desk scrolling or, just mindlessly consuming, you feel bad because your life is out of alignment with the person that you really are. So to really reflect on your values and to really reflect on the things that your mind pays attention to, the ideas you're programming yourself with. Are they helping you in the future or are they just making you feel more depressed and despondent? Because with this air energy that we're going to be focusing on, we're already with Pluto and Aquarius, we really need to watch out for what our mind focuses on and how we create reality through what we focus on. And we'll talk more about reality creation more in depth in the second hour, but this is not about just forcing yourself to think positively.
Yes.
It's about clearing out everything that's in the way of your true desires. So we'll talk way more about reality creation and how you can do that without spiritual bypassing in the second hour. But basically, you do it without spiritual bypassing by doing it from an authentic place. So if you want to create a more joyful, abundant life, but you feel anything but that, your job is to just process the emotions that are in the way of you experiencing that. And that takes often some deep inner work, or at least being with your feelings with full acceptance.
All right, let's talk about the seed people, or the seed man, seed woman.
Yeah, so let's talk about, the seed people is a really important concept. And just to give a quick overview, Dane Rudhyar, who is one of the main pioneers of modern astrology, had an idea central to his work called the seed man, seed woman, or seed people. And he believed, and this was back in the 60s and 70s when he was really talking about this the most, that Western civilization was nearing the end of its cycle. And it was not just a time of decay and death, but also a time where the seeds of knowledge and rebirth were being planted by certain enlightened individuals. And to become such a seed person was, according to Rudhyar, one of life's highest callings and one which he dedicated his life. So these are like what some people call like the Aquarians. I'm not talking about like literal Aquarians, but there's some quality like of people who have this template they're a little bit ahead of their time. They're a little bit different, right? They're almost like reaching into the future. And often, by the way, you get ostracized and alienated because you don't fit in with the normal consensus. And he really stressed that any mass movement we see today is, in a certain sense, is a leaf movement. He said that was a general trend of humanity. So popular music is an expression of the mass movement or the mass attitude of the day. And he said, that's fine. It's legitimate. There's nothing wrong with that. But the question that leaped to his mind is the door has to be open for something else. So instead of focusing on the dying world, we need to focus on the world, what we need to create. And then in order to do that, we need to be seed people, basically. We need to be through the people who through the future of humanity takes form. And he really said as well, and I'm quoting, you can belong to the realm of the leaf or belong to the realm of the seed. You can follow towards the disintegration or conclusion of the cycle, which also is associated with the masses of the people, or you can isolate yourself so that you can become an agent of change for the creative forces of the universe, for life. In the seed, there's potential. And it has the possibility of life and reproducing the species. It also has a possibility of mutation, which only occurs in the seed. And if you align yourself of that concept, it creates a very different attitude towards life, towards society, towards creative activities. So instead of identifying with a world that's dying, I'm asking you to reflect, what seeds are you planting for this next era? Because the winter time is usually seen as a time for dreaming, for visualizing, for imagining the world we live in. It's almost like think about the cycles of like having a garden, right? Right now, you would start to decide, okay, what seeds do I want to plant? How do I want to map out my garden? You're not going to quite start working on things quite yet, but you might start to get little inklings of what you want to plant in your garden. So apply this to your life as well. Like, what do you want to visualize? What do you want to create? What world do you want to live in? What new identity do you have that's emerging out of all the lessons you've learned of the past 5 years? Instead of just focusing more on what's going on and people fighting and the division, the divide and conquer going on, just really thinking about the person that you have become over the past 5 years and the world that wants to be created through this new being that you've anchored. So we'll give more specific practices for creative visualization in part 2. I think probably in 2025, we'll do a whole episode on reality creation, manifestation, creative visualization without spiritual bypassing. So keep your eyes posted for that. But wrapping up, let's just cover really quickly what we're going to talk about on the second hour. So on the second hour, we're really going to focus on finding your bliss, finding your purpose in life. How can you do that? With Jupiter in Cancer, I feel like we're going to seek to expand through the emotional body, through listening to the emotions, through listening to our intuitive nature. And at the same time, the nodes, which are literally about to switch in 10 days from Pisces to Virgo, and they've been in Aries and Libra for the past 18 months. And so there's going to be a focus on mind, body, spirit health. And there's going to be certain karmic lessons around the Pisces Virgo axis, which we're going to discuss more in the second hour. We're going to talk about the attention economy and how, our focus really depends on what we create. We're going to also, most importantly, we're going to discuss reality creation. And reality creation is really based on your own frequency. It's not just what you're consciously thinking, but it's your being. So we want to give you suggestions on how you can also help use this potent period during winter, at least if you're in the upper hemisphere, to plant these new seeds through creative visualization in the future, and how you can use this active manifestation to create this new world that you're wanting to enter, rather than just reflecting on the dying world, the leaf movements, as Redgar would say.
Exactly. Beautifully said. And again, if you want to have access to the second hour and all other second hours of our Cosmic Matrix podcast, go to my website, veilofreality.com/membership. And you can sign up to the membership there. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be right back.